Happy Sunday morning, everybody. This is a live update on powerful Hurricane Sam that is dominating out here in the open Atlantic. You can see a couple incredible things on satellite here. Very well-defined eye. And we did have a wobble off to the left, and it has wobbled back to the right, back closer to that forecast track. There you can see the official Hurricane Center, National Hurricane Center forecast track, and the maximum sustained winds are estimated at 145 miles an hour, minimum pressure down to 943 millibars, and Hurricane Hunter aircraft overnight last night, or maybe yesterday evening there, did corroborate that strength out of Category 4, but you can see these transverse bands right here. Look at these gravity waves up in the upper level cirrus, suggesting that big-time convection right around the eye wall. Hurricane Hunter aircraft did show some interesting features. Hurricane force winds went out a little bit over 10 miles, so it does have a very compact core, very well-defined hurricane here. Look at that outflow pattern, everybody. We are just doing a tour here of an incredible satellite image of one of the monster heat engines of our planet. Their role is to transport heat from the very warm ocean surface to a loft in the atmosphere and from the tropics toward the poles. A very pivotal role in this planet in transporting heat. But they do cause a lot of problems, and there is a chance that this could impact Bermuda as a powerful hurricane. So we do need to keep a close eye on it. Latest forecast model guidance, though, is shifting just a little bit further east, which is good news for Bermuda, and a little bit less of a closed upper level low off of the mid-Atlantic. So previous models last week were suggesting the potential of Hurricane Sam even bending back toward the northeastern U.S. or eastern Canada, but it looks like the potential for that is also even less likely. But look at this clockwise, upper level outflow pattern. So that's anticyclonic in nature. Usually you have a high pressure anticyclonic outflow over the low pressure here. That is the hurricane core. Rapid latent heat release of this thing. Incredible spiral bands as well. Look at the feeder bands here coming in from the north. Not as much of one from the north. Most of those feeder bands are coming from the lower latitudes. But that's because this storm is moving off to the north of the Leeward Islands, and it is moving off on the southwestern edge of the Bermuda High, aptly named. And this storm is going to move along the southwestern periphery of that Bermuda High and potentially threaten Bermuda up there. A little bit later on up in the Sargasso Sea, maybe as a Category 3 storm. Latest model trends are starting to move it a little bit east of Bermuda, but you need to keep a very close eye on it. It is going to be extremely close. And look at this infrared satellite imagery. This is from the incredible tropicaltidbits.com website. Just an absolutely textbook hurricane there. Look at that clear eye right in the middle. But this is a fish storm. And that is terms that us storm chasers use for a storm that is going to recurve off to the north and miss the eastern U.S. It is wrapping around the western periphery of that Bermuda High, could curve to the north and potentially impact Bermuda. Here is the official National Hurricane Center forecast track showing that major hurricane approaching Bermuda by next weekend. So we're still a long ways out, and this storm is just going to be lumbering along to the northwest. And the good news is that it is going to miss the Lesser Antilles off to the north. It's also going to miss the Greater Antilles as well, but an absolutely compact storm. Hurricane Hunter aircraft, the last mission that was able to go through there, showed a very compact system with hurricane force winds extending out only about 10 miles. So here are the GFS ensembles. These are the 6Z runs. I'm still waiting on the 12Z models, but it does show that consistent recurvature. Still a couple of those members, though, do bend a SAM back toward Nova Scotia, and those are the members that are closing off that upper level low over the mid-Atlantic and then bending it back toward the northeastern U.S. And it doesn't look like that is going to happen, and I'm going to show you why. I'm going to show you the old models that were suggesting that, and I'm going to show you the new models that do show an upper level low that's a little bit more sheared out, more entrained up there in the jet stream, and it does cause Hurricane Sam to move a little bit off to the east. So here are the GEPS ensembles, and these are from last night at 0Z. And still last night, you could see a couple of those members bending Sam back toward Nova Scotia, but then the 6Z runs in the GFS trending just a little bit further east. more of a classic fish storm turn off to the northeast. We were a little bit worried that this was going to try to pull a Sandy and then bend back toward the northeastern U.S., but the good news is that it doesn't look like that's going to happen. The bad news, though, for Bermuda is that it does look like this system is still trending in that general direction. There you can see Bermuda just to the west of the consensus and that official forecast track there, but really the consensus now is shifting just a little bit east of Bermuda. Bermuda's pretty close to 65 degrees west there, just a little bit east of that longitude line, and a majority of those forecast model members do show a very powerful Hurricane Sam, likely a Category 3, maybe a Category 4, sliding just to the east of Bermuda, but very close to where you got to keep a close eye on it. Looks like it's still a week out or so. Still a lot of things can change, of course. So this is some of the old model members of the GFS. And this is the forecast for Thursday of next week. And this is last week's forecast model runs, basically showing a cutoff low down in the southwestern U.S. That could cause a monsoonal surge down there as well. Sometimes these upper level lows here can lead to late monsoon conditions in the southwestern U.S. in the fall. Sometimes it's going to be those tropical systems and hurricanes that will come from the eastern tropical Pacific and make landfall near Baja, Mexico, and lead to a monsoonal surge. We thought Nora was going to potentially cause that. It didn't quite materialize. There were some severe storms. But here you can see Sam, and this is the old model. So watch this upper level low here off the mid-Atlantic. And earlier models were showing this bulbous southern end closing off a lot more and a little bit further south. And look at that. And this caused Sam to lift off to the northeast and then bend back toward Nova Scotia or the Canadian Maritimes, which certainly would have been an intercept potential for us. There you can see Bermuda here right at the base of the trough. And that would have kept Bermuda safe, at least, with this advancement of the trough, it running into a cold front, missing Bermuda off to the east, which it still could do. But there you can see that upper level low closing off there off the northeastern U.S. And that was going to cause Sam potentially to bend back toward the northeastern U.S. But the good news is that we have less of a closed off upper level low off the mid-Atlantic, which would potentially bend Sam back in, depending on the timing of if this upper level low is able to close off the eastern U.S. But I am going to show you what the latest model trends are, and it is for a more progressive sheared out system over this Bermuda high off to the east. This is a Bermuda high that Sam is riding along the southwestern periphery. Last year, for the entire hurricane season, that Bermuda high would extend into the southeastern U.S., and that caused many of the storms to develop in the Caribbean, mature in the Gulf of Mexico, led to numerous landfalls across the Gulf of Mexico shoreline there last year with that record-breaking and tragic hurricane season. We did have Hurricane Ida, though, that made landfall in the Gulf Coast. We also had Hurricane Nicholas out here in the Gulf Coast as well, so it's still a very active season. But now at least we have this Bermuda high out where it should be located in the middle of the Atlantic, and that allows these storms to slide in along the western periphery of that high, lift off to the north, and then even get picked up by a trough and lift off to the northeast. But this was the old model run last week that showed this upper level low closing off just off the northeast and off the mid-Atlantic, and that caused Sam to bend back in. And that would have created a problem out there for Nova Scotia, depending on exactly where that happened. You can kind of see this event that happens and you get kind of a closed upper level low. You get the high pressure building upstream with that warm advection pattern, and then that causes Hurricane Sam to pull a Hurricane Sandy and come in toward the northeastern U.S. But the good news is that the models are trending a little bit away from that. Look at this, like a spoke on a wheel. This is the wheel down here. That is that closed upper level low. Sam lifting off on its northeastern periphery. You can see that high pressure building upstream here. And I also I forgot to mention that I do plan a Q&A exclusive for Facebook supporters. You can find that supporters link on the Gorilla Hail post that I have on my Facebook page. But I wanted to thank you, Facebook supporters, for these last few years of storm chasing and supporting our Team Dominator science. I know I've missed the last Q&A last weekend. We had Hurricane Nicholas as well. So tonight I'm going to be doing that live Q&A this evening, 7 p.m. Central Time. And that's going to be exclusively for Facebook supporters, a live Q&A. We're going to discuss Storm Rising, which is forecast to premiere on August 3rd. on October 3rd on National Geographic Channel. We're going to be discussing the latest on that. We'll also discuss Hurricane Sam, and I'm going to share with you some of the Surgeonator data as well, and update you on the Gravitron network. So right now, Mark is hard at work on the Gravitron network, which is basically a pure network of gravity wave sensors, not subsonic. They're basically subsonic sensors with the infrasound element taken out. Sorry, having a little bit of an allergic reaction here. Get those a lot in the fall. Might sneeze. Hopefully I don't. But now let's go back to a more recent GFS. And look at that trend. That was going from last week's model to the current one. And it shows that this system does not cut off of the Mid-Atlantic. At least this model, the operational GFS. This is the 6Z run from last night. Forgot to take my Zyrtec last night, but I did take it this morning, so should subside here soon. But this shows Hurricane Sam lifting northeast out to sea, so you can obviously see the difference. You don't quite have that cutoff system here off of the northeast causing warm advection out ahead of it to cause that high pressure to build up ahead of it and basically causing a highway toward Nova Scotia or the northeast, which would certainly lead to impacts. We now have a more sheared out upper level system, less closed off, lifting off to the northeast, over top that Bermuda high, and this should bring Sam with it, and should lift off to the northeast, but we still have a lot of time. Sam is going to be moving very slowly off to the northeast as a powerful Category 4 hurricane. I was wondering even if it would make a run at Category 5, but a little bit too much dry air there, I guess. It could make a run at Category 5. It's just eye wall replacement cycles, or maybe not, the sea surface temperatures aren't quite as warm as we see often in the Gulf of Mexico or in the Caribbean. So it'll probably stay as a high-end Category 4, but we'll keep an eye on it. And if it does make a run at a Category 5 hurricane, of course we will be here in Team Dominator headquarters breaking it down. So here I want to show you the National Hurricane Center forecast track. Still taking it toward Bermuda next weekend or early the very following week. But you need to keep a very close eye on this in Bermuda. But I do think it is going to curve a little bit off to the north and just miss Bermuda a little bit off to the east because of that cold front with that progressive upper-level storm system that now doesn't close off the Mid-Atlantic and the northeastern U.S. So the good news is that it doesn't really bend back toward the northeastern U.S., but we're going to have to keep a very close eye on it. Still a couple of those GFS members, even as recent as the 6E. Well, we're really down to one of those members now that bends Sam off to the northwest toward Nova Scotia, and a vast majority of those members now even take a very powerful Hurricane Sam just east of Bermuda. So it's right along near that 60 degrees west longitudinal line, a little bit east of there as well as where Sam is located. So now I'm going to show you some more satellite imagery. Let's dig a little bit further into this just to look at this. It's always fun to look at satellite imagery of a monster hurricane like this one. Look at that eye. And it is wobbling back to the north of the forecast track now. And a lot of times these strong hurricanes like this, they will be wobblers like this. You'll see that eye. I was wondering if this was going to undergo eye wall replacement cycles, but that eye looks quite large there. I'm not seeing a larger concentric ring that's trying to pinch off a smaller eye there. Let me get rid of these the official Hurricane Center forecast track here really quick, so we can see the satellite imagery a lot better. Look at that warm eye right in the middle there. So this is water vapor, shows a very dry, warm eye in the middle. You have sinking air, drying air inside the eye. So that's why you have these very dry conditions, relatively dry inside the middle of the eye. You can see probably a stadium effect. So if you're out there in a ship, probably absolutely terrified by this hurricane, eventually a break into that eye. It does look clear on visible satellite, so you'd look up and see that beautiful blue sky, stadium effect around that very intense eye wall, likely big time waves in there too. Absolutely insane environment. But that shows that sinking motion inside this eye wall, so the very intense ring of convection here, and it does look like we might be trying to undergo an eye wall replacement cycle. you can see the hint at this outer eye wall that might eventually try to pinch off that inner eye wall right in the middle, and then you'd have a leveling off or even a reduction in that intensity as it moves slowly off to the northwest along the western periphery of that Bermuda High. Not a ton of dry air. It seems like this storm has definitely carved out a bit of a core. You could definitely see very impressive outflow as well with this hurricane. And look at that beautiful eye right in the middle there, wobbling off to the north, looping that eye. You can see the upper level outflow pattern there, clockwise. And then you have the counterclockwise cyclone in the northern hemisphere here below it. Absolutely perfect hurricane. There, look at that thing. Just going nuts, just lumbering off to the northwest, wobbling off to the left, back to the right with that official forecast track. It would be awesome if we can get some more Hurricane Hunter aircraft out there. A lot of that would just be for our enjoyment as weather weenies, weather enthusiasts, just to see the data of this impressive storm and to make the forecast models to initialize it with more accurate information as well. More data definitely makes the forecast models and hurricane models improve quite dramatically. So let's now look at the infrared, and we can get an idea of the very warm eye in the middle of this thing. So the reds here and the browns, those are all cold cloud tops. The blacks and grays there, that's intense, very vigorous convection. And it does look like we might be having some type of an eye wall replacement cycle happening. You can see that the coldest cloud tops are just a little bit removed from that eye. So that's likely the outer eye wall there. A lot of times these will have these concentric rings, so it's not purely an annular hurricane. And then you got this very intense inner eye wall with those 145 maximum sustained winds. And then you get the warmer temperatures with that sinking air that's compressionally. It's also warming as it descends, as it sinks. And that creates a very warm, clear eye there right in the middle. And there you can see it. Look at that warm eye up here. Wow, that is beautiful. And you can use microwave imagery too to see those different concentric rings within these hurricanes. I'll show you that as well next here. But look at these transverse bands that are perpendicular to the flow. So the flow is cyclonic. It's wrapping around here in a counterclockwise fashion. And then you get these bands, these gravity waves in the cirrus deck here, transverse bands that are perpendicular to that flow. Basically a sign of very vigorous convection associated with this hurricane. Big eye wall in the middle there. Hurricane force winds apparently extend out about 10 miles, but so it is also a very compact hurricane despite its large, impressive size here on satellite. Just an absolutely incredible storm here. But the good news is that it is going to be lifting off to the northeast as a fish storm. But it could impact Bermuda. So usually when you get these storm systems and you say fish storm, that's great news for the United States. But for Bermuda, a lot of times it's bad news for them. But it's a very small island, and this is a compact hurricane. And catastrophic impacts would require the inner core of this hurricane to impact the island of Bermuda. And it's very easy for this to shift a little bit off to the east and miss the island. You could be on the weaker side of the hurricane and really dodge those impacts. And this is just something that happens often this time of year, usually a little bit earlier in the hurricane season. You'll get these powerful hurricanes in the open Atlantic moving along the southwestern periphery of that Bermuda High, coming very close to Bermuda. And then you got to wonder if that upper level trough that is steering the system off to the north, does it close off and try to bend Sam back to the northwest? And in this case, the good news is that the forecast models are trending a little bit away from that solution. The hurricane intensity models here, these are from tropicaltidbits.com. Those intensity models do show that Sam likely has reached peak intensity and should just begin a gradual weakening toward a still powerful Category 3 hurricane. Likely will maintain Category 4 status, though, for several days, well into next week. And really that intensity is more dependent on eye wall replacement cycles. So as those eye wall replacement cycles happen, they can act to weaken a very high-end hurricane like this just a little bit and prevent it from reaching Category 5 intensity. So the good news is that Sam is going to turn off to the northeast. Likely it's going to miss Nova Scotia and the northeastern U.S. unless the models start to trend back again. And if that happens, if those forecast models do trend back a little bit toward last week's solutions, then we'll have some big problems. Let's take a look at the European model if I can on here. Well, we would like to do that. But anyway, you can see that upper level low in the European model. Still does, it even splits into a couple different ones. This is last night's model. Let me make sure you can see the East Coast just below my head there. You can kind of see a double-barreled look to that trough ejection with that southern bulbous end not dominating. So this lead vortex here dominates, shears off to the northeast, bringing Hurricane Sam with it. But if this southern lobe here dominates, and this is next weekend, then there is a chance that it could bend Sam back in. But it looks like more of a sheared out upper level system here, as depicted by last night's European model. And in fact, a cold front will probably even arrive in Bermuda out there, helping to save the island from a direct impact of a powerful hurricane. But the official National Hurricane Center track still shows a major hurricane approaching Bermuda next weekend. So that's when we're going to be watching this very closely in Bermuda next weekend. But I still think that the forecast model trends are showing a more progressive upper level trough, less cutoff there off the northeastern U.S., and a very less likely scenario for Sam to bend back to the northwest. But it is still possible. You know how these models go, especially when you're this far out. They can always trend back to that. We call that windshield wiper effect. And we'll start to see the more members bending it back to the northwest. But you got to look for those trends. And the trends run to run with these forecast models as they have a lot more members off to the east. And the GFS does a pretty good job. I am a big fan of that GFS model these days, especially that upgraded model. We learned a lot about how great the GFS model is last year, kind of knocking that westward bias of the European model a little bit, getting rid of that, and the GFS model seemed to nail some of those hurricane landfalls right up until the very end. Really starting with Hurricane Laura especially. It did a great job with the Hurricane Laura landfall there in Louisiana, whereas the European model is showing Hurricane Laura passing off to the west toward the Texas coast. That's why we went all the way out there to the Bolivar Peninsula and then ended up shimming back to the east toward Lake Charles to intercept Hurricane Laura there. So thank you everybody for joining me for this weather report this morning. I hope that you have a great Sunday. I hope that your NFL team does well. The Dominator brisket turned out great yesterday. My next door neighbor also contributed a corned beef, which was quite salty but also good. Tasted like a real thick pastrami type deal. But the brisket turned out good. Maybe not as good as the last one that I did, which was a lot more juicy, but it was still a great brisket, better than anything you can get at the store. But look at this eye wobbling back to the right. I woke up this morning, saw that wobble back to the left. I knew it would come back again. These slow-moving, powerful hurricanes like this will wobble quite a bit, especially as they're undergoing an eye wall replacement cycle, and that inner eye will wobble around. But if anything, it looks like the eye is expanding in size just a little bit. I'm not really seeing any evidence that it is constricting right now and that eye wall replacement cycle is underway, but there is evidence that there is some evidence of a concentric outer ring of convection, at least on infrared, those slightly colder tops, and that could eventually cause an eye wall replacement cycle and then cause this intensity to level off. But look at that stadium effect there, folks. It does look like there might even be a little smaller eye that's spinning around inside of that, but I think we're just looking at an angle down to the ocean surface. Sometimes you can even see those little mesovortices. You see that little flashing in there, those fast-moving low-level clouds. Those are likely mesovortices that are spinning around inside the eye. And then you can see that beautiful stadium effect there along the outer periphery. You can see these agitated cloud tops here, the eye wall. That's the eye wall of the storm system, the big convection there around the eye. And then you get the sinking motion inside the eye on the inner periphery of that eye wall there. That causes it to clear and to compressionally warm. Probably another mesovortex right there, or just looking at that stadium effect, looking straight down to the ocean surface. But I do think that flashing that you see there, those are mesovortices that are moving around very rapidly inside of this hurricane. So an absolutely beautiful storm here. We'll just keep breaking down these forecast models, look at the synoptics as well. Look at those transverse bands that we were talking about that are perpendicular to the flow. And also I have my varsity tutors class tomorrow, September 27, on how to be a storm chaser. So I've been working hard on that this last week. All of those graphics and everything, hopefully firing people up to maybe even pursue a career in meteorology or storm chasing or the sciences. But I look forward to sharing with you what I do for a living as a storm chaser and what other storm chasers do for a living as well. Different types of storm chasers, we'll break those down as well. The Yahoo chasers, the media chasers, the scientific field science chasers. I would say I'm probably a combination of all of them, including Yahoo. I've definitely got some Yahoo clown type behavior. Naturally, it does look like there might be just a little bit of dry air trying to come in here, but that is a very compact, well intact inner core there. Beautiful spiral bands around this system as well. So this is Hurricane Sam. Minimum pressure down to 943 millibars. Maximum sustained winds at 145 miles an hour. Still just cranking out here. Heading toward the Sargasso Sea. Potentially could impact Bermuda next weekend or very early next week. But the models are trending just a little bit further east with this storm, but it's going to be a wobbler here over the next several days as a powerful hurricane wobbling back and forth here, moving on the southwestern side of that Bermuda high. So happy Sunday, everybody. Hopefully you can also get out there and enjoy this beautiful fall weather, if it is beautiful where you are located. But in the meantime, we are just going to be breaking down Hurricane Sam here in the days to come. Never stop chasing.